I don't know, Phil. It might just be me, but I kind of just want Oleksandr Svatok to be this angry the entirety of the season.
To what are you referring?
He doesn't like getting pushed around
Mm,
by LA Galaxy players, one in particular.
right.
He does not like draws that happen at kind of the last minute. I think these are good things for this man to be angry about. I like when he is angry because he is angry for good reasons.
Right, right. Yeah. So if you did not see that on Wednesday, Svatak and Diego Fagundez, a player you might remember from his time at Austin, got in a little scrap. Fagundez described it online as a dirty kickout, and Svatak took issue to Fagundez taking issue, and it was quite amusing. They had two 1-1 draws over the weekend. We'll get into that in a second. What did you make of Diego lashing out online and lashing out at the We Are Austin guys in particular?
First of all, there was some clarification after the fact that it
Mm,
wasn't directed at the We Are Austin guys. It was
mm,
directed at somebody else of the podcast. Who that person could be, I don't know. Who was
mm,
trying to make a meal out of somehow inserting himself into the situation, who
mhm.
actually had nothing to do with the situation and needs to constantly recenter every narrative around his incredibly important position. You're part of his club or you're not. His club, not this club. It was interesting that Diego was going into it being about somebody trying to get clout or attention for their podcast, which is why myself included, various other people misunderstood. Was he coming at the We Are Austin guys where he felt burned because he just did an interview with them? Wasn't the case at all. Hernan clarified that. But to me, this whole thing came off like a WWE storyline. It was this guy trying to get himself over. He's trying to compare himself to people who are actively in beefs with each other. He's trying to frame something as a bigger, stupider deal than it was in the moment and after the fact. And I don't know. I feel like in reality, professional footballers probably have better things to worry about. But on
Mhm.
this particular day, in this particular case, he did not because he just didn't let it go for like a whole day. And now it's something that he's just making part of his personality.
When you are playing soccer and you are participating in social media, the first rule of that is generally don't. But he did
Yeah.
not. He did not take that sage advice that other players, past and present, have not taken over the years. Some are good and pretty benign at it, and others just get themselves into a whole heap of trouble when they do that. So found that to be interesting. Also, he looked kind of ridiculous going up against Svatok. I mean, going up against Svatok is not a thing that I would advise anybody do. It was a short-lived scrap that happened, but I think Svatok probably looked better in it overall. And I just got to say, so Friday night, I went to a 80s themed daddy daughter dance for my daughter's school. And somebody there dressed as Spicoli had a surfboard, wondered if he was going to commit to the bit and carry the surfboard around the entire dance. He did not. There was a lot of neon. One guy had a neon tracksuit and a comically oversized cell phone. I was wearing a brightly multicolored neon jumper outfit and a bucket hat. So it was a lot of Miami Vice people. In short, what I am saying is that we all collectively gloriously looked ridiculous, celebrating, really committing to the bit in the moment. And despite all that, none of us looked as ridiculous as Diego Fagundez did trying to fight Oleksandr Svatok.
Emergency podcast. They did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, oh yeah, shut up, oh yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast, where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies. The team is off in Southern California. They are at Coachella right now. They have played 2 of 3 games that they are going to play there. They have played the 2 that are publicly available. We've gotten a view of them the only view that we're going to get until the season starts on the 22nd, but nice to see them out there. Nice to see some of what Nico Estevez is cooking up. Moises, you had an opportunity to watch those games in real time and just wanted to check in, see how you're doing, and what you thought to kick us off here about some actual game action talk that we're going to have.
Well, Phil, I'm basking in the glow of the lies of the preseason. Frankly, it's the warm water spa experience that we've been longing for is some
Mhm.
actual match play. We had some give everybody some minutes, spread the minutes around kind of stuff in the LA Galaxy fixture, in the St. Louis fixture, as Nico mentioned in his comments. Cub reporter Cam Kubek after the LA Galaxy match, the St. Louis game was always going to be rearranging those minutes and focusing more on people who are expected to play more minutes. But to that point, he's made a big point of we need to make sure that our roster depth is worked out and that we are ready to pull those levers rather than looking at them as emergency breaks, to go with
Right,
our
right.
theme, that they need to be ready to go. I found the lies of the preseason to be fascinating and interesting and revealing in general. I like that there is this focus on use the preseason to see who connects well, what works well, and what breaks or fixes things in different respects. And not worry about who's getting the championship belt. We're all just here to wrestle.
So basically, in the Galaxy game on Wednesday, it was a split squad, 45 minutes each approach. Basically, you had eight kind of starting level slash rotational starter first teamers, and then two or three probable Verdos players, and then switch that out wholesale and got that same kind of approach in the second half. Whereas in Saturday's match against St. Louis, you had a nominally starting lineup, save for, of course, a few arrivals, one of who we're going to talk about here momentarily. And they went full 60, and then you had nine players switched out at that point, and other players got to run. So certainly they're getting into game fitness. Certainly they probably could go full 90 at this point, but I think they're working up to that. But saw some good things in there, saw some interesting approaches in terms of how the attack was going. We're not going to get a complete picture, obviously, until Sabovic and Uzuni are in, but we did get to see some of the ideas that they had. Again, mostly a kind of one striker setup. I mean, again, once Uzuni gets here, I suppose that changes, but saw some good things, saw some long balls that were being launched. There was not a lot of cross and hope approaches to that, which I liked. Owen Wolf was especially lively, a lot of good take the ball from the end line and run inside. That's how he engineer the first goal that happened against the Galaxy, the first and only goal in that game for Austin, and then of course getting the assist on the Oberon goal on Saturday. A really nice play from him. Pretty exciting to see him emergent. Matt Doyle had a column Tuesday, which I had referenced in my Saturday article, talking about Herrera as a potential breakout player, which he said was borderline irresponsible to call him that because he kind of has broken out. He's been a starter for 4 years, but in terms of kind of this idea of him jumping up to the next level. But I feel from what we've seen in these preseason games, maybe Owen Wolf is that player. Maybe Owen Wolf is the person who's going to emerge and get more of those minutes. Again, it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out, and interesting to see whether one or both of them are going to make that leap during the season.
A couple things that really stood out to me. Irvin Torres, who I've got to give due credit to Landon Cotham, who was a big booster of this guy, going back to before, just as he was officially signed to the second team last year out of the academy. Big booster of this kid. And I chatted with him briefly before last year's second team season opener, at which time he was not rostered because they were still finishing up his paperwork. And from that moment to when I chatted with him briefly after the open practice, where I saw him just sitting on a bench waiting to get picked up from practice, which
Right.
was, I don't mean to infantilize the guy, but he's still a teenager. That was just real cute. Was this happy-go-lucky G shucks teenager, just real happy to be doing this job and be given these opportunities. I rolled down my window and told him that coach had shouted him out in the pre-practice comments to press, and it really genuinely came off like he was really surprised and appreciative of that kind of praise, which is not something that players in this club had been used to. There are those differences that we're going to keep talking about to an extent, not to belabor the new coach, old coach kind of thing. But look, when you got 4 years of that's all that there is for the club and looking at what this new chapter bodes, I think Irvin Torres is an interesting look at that, is the progression of a second team player to the first team. Other second team players have been working through in the preseason. Diego Barca has been doing pretty well, and he was pretty impressive last year on the second team. I think that we're seeing the plan for how they're looking to use the second team, first team dynamic overall. We mentioned Svatok getting angry and how I want him to stay angry. Stay hungry, I think is the phrase, but stay angry is good for Svatok. He looked so mad about that draw yesterday. That's the energy that I want feeding out of the preseason. That's, again, to use the WWE metaphor, you want that to build the storyline of what is that Galaxy game at home in April going to be like, man? Going to be something special and interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I just overall, I think that we are gleaning new and different things and learning different ways to look at and watch this club than what we've been used to for the last 4 years. And that's going to take a phase of adjustment for those of us in the press boxes across the country and the continent, and those watching on TV, those watching from the stands. It'll be a different vibe of things. I'm not an active FIFA player or EAFC player, but to your point, we really did not see as much of that press square to pass, press triangle to pray. And that in and of itself, to me, gives me a great deal of hope for there being a lot more interesting stuff for us to feast on over the course of the next 8+ months.
To your point about Svatok being angry, I think he should have been angry in that case. I think they all should have been angry. Again, this happens. This happened last year. This is something this club still obviously needs to work on, where there's a defensive lapse that happens and all this good work that's been done gets a little bit dismantled in the course of that one play. In this case, they're 2 minutes away from a win, looked like a really impressive win. I was writing it up as if it was going to be a win, and then had to change some things when that happened. It was a switched ball. Kolmanic went away from Chiullán, the player who scored, to go with the near post runner. Jimmy Bryant was playing wing. He probably should have keyed on that player and did not. He didn't get there until pretty late. So yeah, in my article, I've got a still from the video, and you can just see Chiullán with acres of space. Kolmanic just drifted away. Jimmy Bryant is furiously running to try to get him. No way he's going to catch him. Pretty easy goal from an unmarked player at that point. They've got to work on those things. I mean, again, yeah, with the Galaxy goal, same thing, where you had not quite the same thing, but you had this kind of overload on Austin's right flank, and you had Gabriel Peck, who made a really good near post run and collected that. So again, it's about just man defense, about getting to your players, not getting caught out like that. I assume that's something that they're going to work on. I assume that they're going to look at that tape and review that and try to work on those things. But again, yeah, this is a thing that concerned me last year, and it's a concern that I'm going to take into this year. It's just what happens when you have these kind of defensive mistakes. Even if they only crop up a few times a game, that can be a few goals that can turn wins into draws into losses.
If we're about to move on to the next thing, before we jump off of these games, I just realized I should mention there was a cool fan base thing that happened yesterday, thanks to our pal Aggie at the Fighting Leslies, where all the different supporters groups and some supporter group based vendors got together over at Turnstile off of Burnett Road over near the stadium to have the preseason game on at Turnstile, have some great cocktails, coffee, sandwiches in particular. Their chicken sandwiches are incredible. There you go. Shout out for Turnstile's chicken sandwiches. I'm
Turnstile's great. Yeah.
If I'm hungry, I'm never not going to order a chicken sandwich while I'm at Turnstile.
Right.
The vibes were really good. It was people who are part of different groups, some of which have crossover, some of them have beef and rivalries and that kind of thing. But it was a similar vibe, similar energy to what was there at the open practice, what was there at the tailgate at the tail end of last season, where all of the SGs got together to crash some suds and walk across the street and go to a game. This is a fan base that feels like it is ready to go together through the thick and thin, and, wins, losses, draws, but preferably, water, beer, and 3 points. That is something that, following what the last 2 years have seen, it is impressive to not see a fan base completely collapse, completely implode, because we have seen that happen in other MLS cities where there is a big drop off. There might be stars over some crests, but there is suddenly a big drop off in that incredibly engaged, hyper sicko group of people that are what keep things going in the stands. It seems like the fans are going to give Roto another season of trying to summon up the energy when there is none and see what kind of magic they can deliver, as he wrote in his lovely little letter from a season and a half ago.
Right. Yeah, I think the vibes are generally good. Again, going to be curious to see how that opener shakes out. Of course, that is Sporting Kansas City. Some interesting cash for trade deals happened last week. One of them was Joveljic coming to SKC from the Galaxy. Galaxy, kind of an interesting remake that's happening. Ricky Puig is going to be out most of the year. Joveljic is now gone. Bergman's gone. Delgado's gone. A lot of people are ranking the Galaxy pretty highly, and I don't know that that's necessarily going to bear out in terms of the changes that are happening there. Again, yeah, that game against the Galaxy is going to be pretty fun and pretty interesting. But yeah, that SKC game, you have a pretty strong number 9 now. You have a team that is kind of evolving from where they were. They've gotten rid of some venerable older players, Johnny Russell and Alan Polito in particular, and going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. If you recall last year's opener, and they have lost 3 of 4 openers, that was the game against Minnesota. That was the very lackluster first half. That kind of gave some early indications that maybe things were not going to go so well. So again, going to be curious to see how they come out in that first half, what kind of mentality they have with the openers. Because again, the only opener they won was in 22, and that really set a tone for a much better season than the other 3. So I do think that it is something that's fairly important. Definitely something that I'm going to be focused on post-match for that first game in less than 2 weeks here.
To give just a quick preview of something that now comes to mind, what I am most eager to ask Nico Estevez right now, next time we get press availability, is coach to coach how he views Peter Vermees as an opponent. Because we're going to get a different answer out of him than we did Josh Wolf, who played under Peter and who has a different kind of relationship to answering that kind of question. I'm interested to hear what we hear from the coach in advance of that season opener, and also just the way that he handles that kind of, how do you look at them, not just as a squad of players, but how do you see yourself going against this coach and their staff tactically?
Right. Coach for life, Peter Vermees. He's been there, I think, like 14, 15 years now. Easily the current most tenured coach. Josh Wolf was 4th on that list prior to his exit from Austin FC. And we learned last week something that I'd been hearing about for several weeks, something that I was definitely trying to confirm last weekend when I got more bits of information that kind of pointed to what happened. Josh Wolf is now an assistant coach of the Houston Dynamo under Ben Olsen, which was a little surprising, I am sure, to people who were not maybe expecting him to do anything other than golf for all of this year. Before that, obviously, Gavin Wolf had announced that he was leaving Austin FC, did not announce for where. I, of course, had this information about Josh at Houston, a rumor at that point, but then got more and more consistent confirmation type things last weekend. And when I heard about the Gavin thing, I thought, oh, he's probably going to Houston. He's probably following his dad to Houston. And sure enough, that's what happened. I think a lot of people are ready to move on from Josh. But again, I think that that's going to make the rivalry a little bit more spicy. I do think that him being on the sidelines in black and orange, I assume.
Mostly black, hints
mostly
of
black.
orange.
He'll just take the black shirts that he wore in Austin and repurpose them in Houston, I guess. But what did you think of the news?
So there are a couple things that I wanted to dig into on this. A little bit of behind the curtain thing that doesn't go too far into full sourcing and all that kind of stuff, because one of the things that I find entertaining is when a rumor comes up or something gets broken or half broken. In this case, the demand will come up of, okay, well, what are your sources? Who are your sources? Well, that's not how journalism works. You don't just reveal and burn your sources and then continue to have those sources. But the little bit of additional context that I'd give is that you had gotten an indication, you looked into it a bit, you got another source of information giving some credence to this being possible. And this was weeks back.
Right.
And in the newsroom of 2, this is a thing that when you're doing the due diligence and you're doing the journalistic standards and ethics stuff, you sit on stuff for weeks and it ain't comfortable, it ain't fun. And oh boy, do you want to talk to people about it. But the calculus being done was, how do you reasonably take care of your sourcing on this, but also encourage this to just getting out there because, come on, can we please just get it out there already?
Right.
Rather than things potentially be irresponsibly broken. Because one of the things that I caught wind of was that somebody else who had information on this much later than we did originally was telling people that Gavin Wolf had been promised a first team spot, which did not sound right at all. Just basic scrutiny didn't sound right at all, and didn't sound right based on what we had. And it becomes a matter of going, the information needs to get out there in the most responsible way that it can. That's why we go through the sometimes annoying thing where somebody else takes credit for and actually breaks something. It's more down to our responsibility to make sure that it gets broken in the most responsible way possible.
Yeah.
Because when things get crazy and uncontrolled, then there's what Gavin Wolf is a guaranteed starter at Houston Dynamo. That, oh my, the nepotism never ends.
I mean, he's 15. Like,
he's 15.
Let's pump the brakes on that.
He's no Kevin Sullivan, okay? He's no Kevin Sullivan.
Right.
He's no Diego Fagundez. Let's be real. That's a little bit of background that I just want, now that it's out there, now that it's done. Seeing the first image of him wearing Dynamo gear, it was kind of weird. It was that kind of, what variant from a parallel universe is this? It was it was weird and jarring and whatever. I found the reaction within the fan base to be interesting, where it was, a lot of people found it just hilarious. And a lot of people had that kind of surreal moment of, that is going to be really weird. I didn't even it's one thing for the story to break and go, oh wow, that's weird, and then to imagine him wearing Dynamo gear, for people who have watched him wearing Austin gear when he has to, for 4 years, seeing that reaction spread out was interesting enough. But yeah, I hope overall, we talked about Owen Wolf a little bit earlier. I hope that this next stage of things, Owen is able to get some distance from various things. I hope that in Gavin's development as a player, he isn't looking at a similar being tied to a nepotism narrative that Owen was, because by all indications, he's a very talented defender. So I hope the best for everybody involved, and I like that it seems like folks are mostly ready to move on.
For Josh, it's an interesting journey to come back to be an assistant after being a head coach, but Houston's a really interesting project. Obviously, Coco Carrasquilla has left. We also learned last weekend, because I was at a conference where the Dynamo president was speaking in Houston, and he said, oh yeah, we got a trade with the union we're going to announce in 24 to 48 hours. And then it turned out to be Jack McGlynn, who is really pretty talented. If you look at his numbers, if you look at what he did for a union team that kind of struggled last year, but he still had some pretty incredible numbers, first and second in the team, and a lot of kind of key categories like progressive passes and the like, just being able to create and move the ball from point A to point B. So now he's going to be basically the engine that's running the Dynamo for this upcoming season. And that should be pretty interesting. So again, that's a team in transition. Not sure how they're going to do compared to last year, but certainly McGlynn makes them a much better, much more complete team than they were before that cash for trade happened. And it's like 2.1 million. It's a huge amount of cash. Yeah. Jovic was kind of similar. I think it's good for the league too, that these things are being allowed to happen, that there is this new mechanism where players, where they're probably not gammable at all, you can still have this mechanism to capture those players and integrate them into your team.
And one of the things that brings to mind, talking about Onstead talking at this conference you were at, which was in Houston, conveniently, is that, again, on the topic of sourcing and confirmation of things, was that the president of the club said in no uncertain terms, we have completed this deal. And the next day, when it was, oh, that it's for this player, there were people out there going, well, but what confirmation do we have? And you sat in a room with the guy in charge of that operation going, we have completed this business transaction. And when you have somebody in that position saying, we have completed a business transaction, the ink is dry. That's not a waiting to hit save kind of situation. Apologies to Chase Hoffman for once again bringing up his trauma.
Of course, 20 minutes after he announced that, it became Bogert official, which might have had to do with me messaging Bogert and saying, hey, maybe just heard about this trade. Onstead just announced this. Do you know what's up? And sure enough, he knew what was up. He has his ways. He has his sources. Speaking of sources, and yeah, then everybody learned it. And Yeah, one of the writers I know from the union, Matt DeGeorge, was not happy at all about the trade, very dismissive. This was a conference that involved American Soccer Analysis, which is a group of data nerds who do really great work, just breaking down the game, doing programming with Python and R, and taking data sets and helping to make a little bit more sense of the game. Work that I try to do, not the programming, but trying to use that data and trying to integrate that into stories and storytelling. And that was a part of it. But I'm going to be doing some previews, not of Austin, previewing Philly and SKC. And so got a lot of deep dive stuff on McGlynn, and yeah, he's real good. And then SKC, I'm gonna tackle at some point today and have some kind of insights heading into that opener. So again, yeah, I'll point people to where those are at. Again, some non-Austin writing that I am doing amidst the Austin writing. So a lot of fun. Okay, let's talk about
Who's in
Besard
country?
Sabovic.
Who's here? Who's here? Phil.
Yeah, Sabovic is here. Uzuni is not. So that part of it is still concerning, but with Sabovic being here, it sounded like he was with the team at Coachella, but obviously did not play.
Yeah, here's the thing, and the immediate breadcrumb folks latched onto was in the photography that the club shared, there are palm trees
Mhm.
in it. And yes, there are palm trees in Texas. Okay. Not so much in Austin.
Mhm.
So for them to do the glamorous, beautiful bokeh golden hour photography of the guy with a bunch of palm trees around, yeah, he was in California with them. That's something that we learned pretty quickly, and I feel like we can put a fair amount of credence on, even though the club wasn't making a big deal of it. People are used to really having to get every last bit of savory flavor they can out of breadcrumbs, and it's okay. We're getting used to it not having to be that serious. So he's here. Uzuni, they're eagerly waiting on his visa, just like I'm sure a lot of visa applications and processing times that were not previously that much of a concern or didn't take this long are taking a little bit longer because there are new people in charge of all of that paperwork and gumming up that
Yeah.
paperwork in the U.S.
Yep.
government. Unfortunately,
Right.
for 1,000 reasons not related to soccer, we're going to keep waiting. But this is something I mentioned to you earlier this week. Is yes, it is concerning that Uzuni's not here, but Sabovic is here. One of the two is in, and considering the state of the rest of the roster, I'm not remotely as worried about this taking a little bit longer because, look, if it takes months, there are much bigger problems that indicates, not for the
Mhm.
team, but for the state of the world. I'm not worried, just a little annoyed, but I'm not considering this apocalyptically bad. They are paying him enough, and the relationship has been cased in such terms that I'm not concerned about his fitness. I'm sure that he is staying fit and keeping working on his conditioning and doing what can be done. And hey, extra time with the wife as they approach welcoming the baby, which maybe is
Right.
going to be a better transition for him coming over rather than, okay, bud, we're going
Mhm.
to get you on a plane. You're going to be here this weekend, 2 days after
Right.
a
Right.
deal is
Yeah.
signed. I think that there are
Mhm.
really more positives to this than negatives. There's just that kind of reflexive thing of this should be a problem. This is something I should react to negatively. Oh man, why isn't he here? I'm not as worried. I would rather this kind of warm handoff transfer situation more comfortable for him and his family and make it so that when
Mhm.
he does get here, he is not being thrown into a bucket of ice water.
I am concerned about that. And we did when we talked
Mm-hmm.
to Nico a few weeks ago. He talked about the wife having a support system in Barcelona, having family there. Certainly in that part of the equation, I think that's going to be good. But for him to be away from them and playing in the US and trying to adjust to everything, I am concerned that's going to be a little tough. And then I can imagine that there might be one point in the season where he'll want to get there. We weren't able to determine like when the due date is and all that, but again, maybe it's imminent, maybe that's what they're waiting on, or I assume when the baby is born that he's going to want to jet over there and spend some time, and as he should, right? Obviously, the team is deep enough to whether new fatherhood, they've definitely done it before. John Gallagher did it last year. Nick Lima was a new dad a few years ago. It is something to just factor in with guys of this age at these stages of their lives, that kids are going to enter into the picture. But again, being half a world away is a lot different than obviously what Gallagher's experienced, and I believe a factor in Vasquez and why he wanted to come back to MLS from Monterrey.
And something that does come to mind on that front is with Uzuni, the impression that one gets, and this is very much a parasocial way of trying to assess something, but this is also not a knock at other soccer players, but the relationship between Uzuni and his wife, based on the way that they post on social media, you can very easily see the performative version of, oh my gosh, we're just two crazy kids in love. Oh my God, we're just so in love with each other. Oh my God. There really is something deep and sweet and genuine in the way that they post about each other. It's something that's nice to see. I love seeing two crazy kids in love. I love seeing new parents really getting to relish that experience the way that John and Peyton did last year, the way that Brandon and his wife have been. I think that this is Austin FC was Wingers FC at one point. It was Spare Parts FC at one point, and that it's Himbo Dad FC to an extent now. I think that's a good vibe. That's a good thing for them to lean into. This is a team that wants to be known as a destination for family men who are looking to start their families and have as comfortable of a ride with that as they can, being a professional footballer. That's really where I am. You're definitely right to have that concern, and I'm with you on that. And I just feel like in this Roto era, Roto is the one who says, let my family go on vacation across the ocean without me for Christmas, and I will be the one who suffers. Boys, you will not be the one who suffer. That's the way that Tio Roto comes off to me, honestly.
Anything else we should hit?
So we've got one little mystery that I don't think we can solve, and we don't have enough data to go on, that I wanted to touch on. And then after that, something fun that I sent you late last night, a possible controversy brewing, possible vandalism, theft, something crazy. I'm way overhyping it. This is really just a joke, but not joking. People, myself included, have been wondering, what's going on with Mikkel Desler? Where's Desler? Not where's Waldo, where's Desler? He's been
has
notably
not played
missing.
in Coachella.
Hasn't played in Coachella. I feel like we have asked, is he injured? We have not gotten an answer. And I mentioned to you last night, I would explain my Sherlock Holmes deductive reasoning construct and justify it. Based on, let's say, the last couple seasons, as I've been doing this with you, when we ask the club for confirmation, oh, hey, is so-and-so injured? We usually get an answer either way. Right. If that's at play. We've not gotten an answer, so I don't think it's that he's injured. Has he been traded or transferred? That also does not make sense, because he's easily top 5 most talented guys on the team for me in terms of what he brings. That doesn't make sense either. It's got to be something else. He is not, like, he's not been kidnapped. Like, it feels like we've got to get some further information on this in the next few days. I feel like the concern and panic that is out there in the fan base is, like I mentioned earlier, based on that. When we got crumbs to go on, that's all we got to sustain ourselves, and we got to figure out how we're making a meal out of it.
This does feel like more of a personal reasons, not soccer related kind of thing. I think if it was an injury, we would have known. I suspect we'll know in the next couple of days something about this mystery and what it is. But yeah, it's not terribly concerning at this point in the preseason. It'd be good for him to be there. If he's missing a couple of games, I think that's fine, given kind of his level of play and what he's shown. Like, he would certainly benefit from these preseason games, but I don't think it's going to slow his growth or anything like that. Hopefully we will know more about that soon. Definitely we'll share that once we learn whatever this might be. But in the meantime, I'll feel a lot better about things when we know where he is and Uzuni comes back, but not terribly worried about anything except for the defensive lapses right now. Bukari looked really good. I'm liking seeing what he's doing and how he's developing, because obviously last year we saw some flashes, but they were pretty limited. I'm a big believer in him. I think he's going to be great eventually and might make that leap this year. I'm hoping he makes that leap this year, because he is a designated player, and this would be a good year to do that. We're beginning to see some signs. Definitely the goal he scored on Wednesday. He had a ball to Vasquez in one of the games that was headed and saved, which is pretty incredible ball in. So seeing some good runs, seeing some good 1v1 things. Pretty excited about what he's doing.
I guess that just leaves maybe the controversy of the weekend
Oh yeah.
to close out on. Phil, we all have a past, right? Your past involves the Seattle Sounders, and another jersey leak has dropped, and it's a Sounders jersey that looks like a Sporting Kansas City jersey. Wasn't it West Ham that dropped a jersey that just looked like an Aston Villa jersey a
Right,
year or
right.
so ago? Same kind of thing. It's almost like a not quite ugly Christmas sweater iteration of SKC hoops, is the way that it looks
Yeah.
to me. As a general, as just objectively, as just a general jersey design, it doesn't look bad, but it does feel like Seattle actively throwing some beef out into the open
It
and
looks
going.
borrowed.
It does look like somebody else's shirt that they borrowed and stuck their own logo on.
Can we use this for 2 years?
The only last thing that I'll leave folks with that is very directly relevant to Austin folks is that last year there was a jersey release party. And as we're on the subject of jerseys, this year there will be some sort of a kickoff event the evening of Thursday the 13th. And that's literally
Okay.
all of the details that I know for absolute certain with no uncertainty. If you're making your plans for the next week, Valentine's Day. Yeah, all right, good for you or not good for you. My condolences or sympathies or congratulations. But the night
Right.
before is what we really care about. Expect that there will be something happening. I have further heard from not direct sources, but indirect sources to expect that it'll be somewhere downtown. Expect
Right.
to be headed downtown on a Thursday night for soccer stuff.
So Thursday, possible jersey event, and Henry Rollins'
No,
birthday.
no, kickoff event, not a jersey event. The jersey will
Okay.
just so happen to have been released the day before, and they'll
Right.
probably have it on sale.
I know
That's the
that there
vibe. That's
are
the energy.
I know there are pre-orders that they have announced. It is
Yep.
called the Heartbeat Kit, and it is going to be $165.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, which
That is what a jersey
is
costs
a
in the
lot of
United
money.
States. Yes, it is.
Yeah, yes,
Yes,
they
it
do.
is.
I did see though, if you want a replica barcode kit, they are available for $29 now. It's clearly a end of the line sale. The authentics are still, I think, like $149, but yeah, $29 replica. Get you some if you want.
I think that's all that we got. So
Okay.
we've got a closed door preseason match next week, and
Mhm.
presumably the players will be that match is that Wednesday,
They've got another one at Coachella, and then they've got one more at
right?
Q2. They play Wednesday against Charlotte, won't be viewable, and then they play Saturday against Nashville, and that's at Q2. If you find yourself at the Verde store for a couple of hours, you might
S-
be able to catch a
Hmm.
glimpse of a game. I
So
know some
so
people have done that.
and this isn't me saying that I have inside info on this, but if they play in Coachella on Wednesday and there's a kickoff
Hmm.
event the next day,
Hmm.
at which time they would conceivably be back in town, there might be player drop-ins at such an event if it is to kick off the new season. And maybe there's some further incentive to making sure that you're free Thursday night.
We're going to close this down for this week, and then we'll be back, obviously, talking about preseason games that we did not see. And yeah, I guess we are going to be previewing a season opener pretty soon.
That is like the worst thing I've ever heard in the history of the 7 years that I've been on this planet.